Hello, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andrew Chaplin. And Andy, how are you? You've been really busy back in the months of October, haven't you? You've been because we both took a break, didn't we? I went to India, and you've been doing your events, haven't you? How did all that go?
Yeah, massively busy over Halloween. Obviously at Tuned In Events, people can join on Facebook, Tuned In Events Facebook group. Yeah, been doing lots of psychic fairs and demos and all sorts, and it's kind of it's not exactly got quieter. Like November and December, I'm still doing them for my sins, and yeah, it's picking up nicely actually.
Wow, that's good. That's good. Well, I've been to India, and it's really strange coming back to the UK where it's all cold and wet and damp. It's actually a milder in Britain to come back to, but it's extremely hot out there, so they don't seem to get cold. It's just hot to varying degrees and levels.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of warm and then hot and then very hot.
Yeah. And my thoughts about India is that it's nice in some aspects. Certainly from the point of view of doing photography and wildlife photography and things like that, it's great, and videoing and stuff. But it's other aspects that just really annoy me, like trying to shop there. Everyone hassles you, and it's all the red tape of everyone stamping their little stamps on bits of paper and receipts and things like that. And if you go to the supermarket there, it's not like when you're shopping, say, maybe in the US or the UK, where you go to the supermarket, you put your things in the checkout, and they say, right, that's 25,000 rupees or whatever it is. They then give you a receipt, and you have to go up to a separate till and pay for it. And someone else comes around with a bag and then gives you your bag of goodies.
Oh, that's mad.
It takes ages. It is crazy system. But, they haven't quite kind of caught up with us on that sort of front of things. And but, yeah, it's an interesting country, but I'm not sure if I'd go there again. But,
well, I mean, we've had an Indian summer, haven't we? Which is where the summer gets prolonged into the autumn and winter months. And you're right, it's very mild here at the moment in the UK. We're not really having proper winter weather yet. It's still kind of autumn weather.
Is that anything to do, maybe, because you mentioned something about a solar flare on Facebook, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, recently there may be some psychic, intuitive, and spiritual type people or energy healers that have noticed this. A lot of spiritual people are feeling exhausted, kind of dizzy, nauseous, headaches all over the place. And apparently we get affected quite a lot by solar flares. So, and we've had a bombardment recently of solar flares. But also, interestingly, I noticed there was a report on something to do with, we're in get this, a dark matter hurricane. So apparently,
you do get them this time of year, don't you?
Out there in the ether somewhere. Now, I don't know how they measure this or know this, but they reckon there's kind of like a swirling mass of dark energy matter in a kind of hurricane formation, and we're, slap bang headlong into it. Very strange.
Batten down the hatches then for the old dark digital matter that's coming through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, people could say, well, energetically, how can you know that it's out there? But the world is going even more crazy. I mean, it's always been a crazy world, but even more crazy than before. Crime is absolutely soaring. People are going mad, essentially. There's a lot more kind of dark things happening. I mean, even today, I don't know if you saw this, Neil, there was a report in Birmingham in England where a load of people just went on a vigilante spree, a bit like the Purge, with machetes on the streets, hacking people and slashing people with machetes. Absolutely bizarre.
Crikey, that's a bit weird. People doing machetes with each other, and maybe it is the solar flares affecting them then, and this dark matter. Now, oddly enough, you mentioned Birmingham there, so maybe our next guest, who is actually speaking from Birmingham, he actually runs the Birmingham UFO group, might know something about that. So I'd like to welcome back, who was a guest with us last year on the Paranormal Peep Show, and that's Mr. David Hodrien. Dave, are you there?
Hello.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. Thanks for inviting us back onto the Peep Show to have a good natter with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And Andy's just mentioned these people getting macheted on the streets of Birmingham. Have you heard anything about that?
You know what? I actually haven't. I've heard of individual incidents before, but if it's something that occurred recently, I didn't actually hear about that. I'm quite surprised, actually, because I would have thought that in my workplace there would have been discussing that. There would have been.
So I'll give you the source. This is the Metro, so metro.co.uk. Nearly 400 joined vigilante mob after losing trust in local police. The vigilante mob is patrolling the streets of Birmingham in response to a shocking wave of violent crime. Nearly 400 people have joined the watchdog group. We stand determined, blah, 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 blah. But essentially, it's lots of people. I think actually what this report is, I think there's a vigilante group against the machete group. I think that's what this is on about. So it looks like it's not 400 people with machetes. It's 400 people. That's
good to know.
going against people with machetes. But you could quite clearly see there's a video and there's images of people just. Yeah, they've definitely got machetes, and there's definitely attacks going on. What do you think to the kind of the idea of this dark energy or something very negative influencing this planet, and kind of almost taking over people's minds in a way?
I think really that violence and crime has always been sort of present, and it comes in peaks and troughs. Obviously, in the modern world that we live in, we've got terrorism attacks and sort of extreme sort of violence that can outbreak anywhere. I mean, my own brother was involved in an incident once down our local bar, which is safe as anything most of the time, but it was broad daylight, and a chap walked in holding a machete.
Wow.
And then proceeded to go and smash all the windows of the pub in at random until the police turned up and arrested him. So, these things happen at random places. And you just sort of be at the wrong place at the wrong time, essentially, to get involved in such things,
It does seem to be spiking, though, because we've just recently had our 118th murder victim in London, which is something unheard of. When I was growing up in the 80s or 90s, there was no problem going into London, really. I mean, crime has always been there, of course, but 118 people murdered in London just this year, just in London. Bizarre.
Maybe it's the population. As it grows, all the problems with a normal population that you get, it grows with it. So back in, say, 1980, you might have had 50 murders, whatever. And because now we've got all these extra people, it is just doubling up or tripling up the figures. And of course, all these solar flares or digital this, that, and the other, or dark matter or whatever that's coming our way, swirling up things. I mean, they always associated people being lunatics with the moon, didn't they? So,
they did. Yeah.
Well, that's where is that indeed where the word lunatic comes from? The whole lunar cycle and its effects on people, that's widely known, and that there are more sort of violent outbreaks around the full moon. So it seems to in some way either consciously or subconsciously affect us, which is interesting. But it affects the tides and gravity and that sort of thing as well, doesn't it? So
that's right. It affects everything. The moon affects everything on the planet, from the tides and. We're full of water anyway, aren't we?
Yes, indeed.
95% biologically water, so it's bound to affect us in some sort of biological way that it's probably been measured, but there's probably lots of undetected things that are happening to us during the phases of the moon as well. But anyway, Dave, back to yourself and Birmingham. You run the Birmingham UFO group.
Absolutely.
Now, you probably have explained this to people before when you came on our show last year with Philip Kinsella. How did you actually get involved in the whole UFO scene, and then obviously later on Birmingham UFO Group?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had an interest in the paranormal since quite an early age, as a lot of people have. It's always fascinated me, kind of unsolved mysteries, and the idea that there are things out there that have not been adequately or completely answered by science. Some people would disagree with that statement, but, we live in an absolutely fascinating world, and I believe there's a lot out there that's still to be fully explained. So I've had a general interest in all sorts of things, psychic abilities, ghosts, etc., for many years. But I started to look into UFOs in more depth in my teenage years, and soon became apparent how many incredible cases there were on record, some of which were backed up by amazing evidence aspects of those cases. Going outside of just testimonial evidence, it was more like radar recordings, so obviously photos and videos in some of those cases, and multiple witnesses and high-ranking witnesses, etc. So I started to look into it, and then began to go to conferences from about age 16. And I remember back then just seeing people going and giving these lectures and being on the front lines with this, and I always thought, how fascinating it would be to be able to go and speak with people directly who've had experiences, and just hear the details from them and maybe pass them out to the public. And that's all it was for many years. It was just a kind of fascination with it, and the idea that how interesting it would be. Birmingham UFO Group actually came around in 2007, so yeah, we're into our 11th year, and it was started by a couple of guys from up Quinton, Craig and Mark, and so I haven't been the chairman right from the off, but I very fast became the investigator for the group because they could see I had a big passion for the subject and wanted to get directly involved. So I began to write reports and speak with witnesses who were coming to the group to talk about their experiences. And then in 2009, they also passed on the group to me because they thought I'd be a good person to just keep it going long term. And for them, it was only really a short term thing. And sure enough, it's been going ever since. So I continue to arrange monthly meetings in Birmingham, where we get lecturers come and speak and show documentaries, etc. And at the same time, I'm the lead investigator for the group. So I regularly look into cases of UFO sightings and contact cases indeed.
So the cases you've been doing and the way you investigate, do you base your procedures of investigations on a kind of template that's provided, say, by a larger UFO group like MUFON or anything like that?
Not directly, no. But there's many aspects, especially when it comes to contact experiences. There's many aspects to that, and I do have a list of questions. But it's I've got that written down somewhere. But I've dealt with so many cases now, all those aspects are in my head. So I'll ask the individual those questions as and when it's necessary. I don't try to lead people. I like to hear people tell me firsthand their experiences and how they interpret them before I start going into how it fits in with the subject of contact. Of course, a lot of these unusual aspects occur with UFO sightings as well. I'm not just saying that UFO sightings are straight up. There's all sorts of very odd elements to them. I mean, the cases come into our group via either phone calls or email. Just really word of mouth has gone around, and we've of course got our websites on the internet that people will find, and there's a sighting report form that people can fill out on that. So there's various ways that people get in touch with me, and then depending on how they wish to communicate, and also depending on how far away they are. Obviously, there's a lot of cases I'll get from around the Birmingham area, being Birmingham UFO Group, and interestingly, we've even had a few in from Birmingham, Alabama. Believe it or not, I actually thought they were talking with an American-based group, but they continued to speak about their cases with me anyway, despite the fact they were overseas. I've dealt with cases from as far wide as Australia. And they'll come in, and then I'll essentially speak with them either via phone or email or Skype or whatever they want. And if they're within reach, I'll go and meet them directly a lot of the time, because it's a lot easier talking with somebody face to face. You can get the emotion, and you can ask questions based on what they're telling you directly, and also ask them to do drawings and that sort of thing. I'm quite thorough with my investigative techniques, so I like to leave no stone unturned. And I'm also happy to tell people where they haven't seen a UFO, where I feel a mundane explanation would be more likely. There are, of course, many cases where things can be misidentified, and there's some unusual things that can be seen up in the air that people may misidentify as a spacecraft or something more unusual.
Do you feel? Sorry, Andy, go on.
I was going to say, in your experience, just rough figures, what would you say is your percentage of easily explainable or fraudulent versus actual very strange, possible, real ones?
I'd say at least 60 or 70%, probably, of the cases that come my way have usually got possible or probable mundane explanations. But a lot of the cases now, of course, the quoted figure that's out there and quoted on a lot of websites is 95%. That roughly 95% of cases can be explained away, and it's only really the last 5%. However, there are quite a few cases coming my way where there are aspects of those cases that don't point towards anything mundane. A lot of the time it's the movement of the object, so they might stop on a dime or just shoot straight upwards really fast, vanish from sight in a clear sky. There's all sorts of unusual things that point away from it being, say, a satellite or a balloon at a distance.
You talked in your message to me recently about some of your recent investigations, including, you said, a stunning Southampton repeat contact case. What's that one?
Yeah. I mean, all the time I'm dealing with multiple cases, especially contact cases, and they tend to go on a lot longer because a lot of the time the individuals had lots of experiences throughout their life. And the case from Southampton involves a lady named Tina. I'm actually speaking alongside Tina down in Southampton towards the start of next month. And we've also spoken together at BUFOG with our initial talk. I've covered her case in quite good depth, but she's had lots of experiences going from the age of 6 right up to present day. All sorts of aspects to those experiences, numerous abductions. She's had incredible body markings that have appeared on her that are directly related to some of those experiences. She's had very, very deep interaction with the beings. So a lot of the time when people have contact cases, the beings are very, very cryptic. They may not say anything at all to them, or they may just say a few words to them. And it's all a big mystery. But with some of Tina's experiences, she's got detailed recollection of being aboard craft and speaking with numerous beings and holding proper conversations with them. It's very easy for people, looking at this, to just dismiss that as just a dream. And of course, if it was just really the facts of what she remembered from occurring in the night, if it was just that, then of course maybe some of those experiences could be put down to a dream. But in a lot of the time with contact, you get all sorts of angles that move away from that, including the body markings that I just described. So, for example, if let's say tonight you go to bed and you have a dream and you're attacked by ninjas, let's say, and they slice you with swords and they slice you on the arm. Well, you don't expect to wake up in the morning and find a sword slice on your arm, do you? You know that when you wake up, it was just a dream, nothing to worry about, and you're absolutely fine. But in contact experiences, abduction experiences, and this doesn't always happen, but in some cases, the individual will find markings on them. And sometimes they can remember how they got those markings. So it may be an instrument of some description that the being has held against their skin or taken samples from them. And they'll have an actual red marking at that place. And sometimes they can look just like bruises and maybe quite abstract. And other times they can be very, very artificial looking, so a clear ring of dots or a clear straight line of dots or triangular shaped reddish marking. Now, these markings will usually kind of fade away within several days. So a lot of the time, if an individual has something happen to them like that, the first thing I'll ask them to do is immediately get a photograph of it. So we've got that to refer to later, because otherwise it's just hearsay. It's just what they're telling me occurred. Occasionally, they can leave lasting scars. But yeah, some of the markings that Tina has had have been absolutely off the scale. They really have. As one such example, it actually feeds into an experience she had that also potentially involved an alien implant. Then we're moving into another aspect of contact here. As I say, it's quite a detailed case, but for those listening who don't know what that is, essentially these small metallic objects that are sometimes found underneath the surface of the skin, or sometimes they're placed sort of in the bridge of the nose, and they'll actually fall out. And they're usually kind of roundish or sort of oblong sort of shapes, mix of metals. Usually the mix of metals is something abnormal, maybe not found on this planet. They don't appear to have any kind of detailed electronics within them, but there are very, very unusual aspects. Certain individuals have removed these, surgeons have removed these and have found them to be linked directly to the central nervous system. Some of them have expressed sort of radio waves, and then when they removed them, the radio waves have stopped. So there are very unusual aspects involving these things, and there's even cases on record where they've been seen to actually move around underneath the surface of the skin.
Funny you're saying that, Dave, because I saw exactly this on, I think it was UFO Hunters, but recently, yes. And I think it was John Lear poking around with some tweezers, and it was actually moving out the way.
Yeah.
And the body's supposed to have two reactions. It's supposed to either kind of like get rid of the object by moving it to the surface and getting rid of it, or it should be inflamed.
Yes.
but these objects don't inflame, and they do move around, and biological tissue actually kind of like latches itself and attaches it to these things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Which tends to suggest that maybe they are monitoring the body systems, and that they've been connected to the nervous system on purpose, and they're sometimes found encased in this membrane. Well, back to Tina's case. She actually had one of these objects removed from her, and it was causing actual pain. And she got her husband to remove it from her, and it just looked like this small silver ball bearing that was covered in this kind of black membrane stuff. And they didn't really know what that was. So back at the time, this is before she'd started to look into ET contact or realise that she was having these contact experiences. And they just chucked it away. They just thought maybe it was a splinter or something like that. Didn't realise what they had there. Years later, much more recent, I think it was 2014, I think it was, a lump appeared on one of her hands. And she went down to the doctors to get it examined, of course, just to see if it had a medical explanation. And the doctor reacted very unusually. Actually, he reacted in a way that suggested that he hadn't seen anything like it before, that it was something very odd. They got her back into the hospital to have this object removed from her hand, and they made a small incision and took it out. And she only saw it for a second or two in the end of the tweezers, but she said the object that they had there looked very, very similar to what they'd taken out of her years before. So it's possible that was another implant in her hand. What happened with this was, because they had the incision and it caused some damage, they put her lower arm inside a bandage, essentially a pressure bandage, just to kind of steady her arm while it began the healing process. And she had to wear that for a couple of days. So on the day she went home, and then the following day, she woke up and there wasn't any pain, but there was a spot of blood, and the spot of blood wasn't down by a hand where they'd taken the object from. It was actually up near the top of the bandage. Really, really odd. So it was just a little spot of blood, no pain at all. She pulls the bandage back and finds, believe it or not, a hole going straight into her arm with no blood. It appeared to be just going in, and then on the other side of her arm was a second hole. And there was no sign of any pain. There was hardly any blood at all. Just this little droplet that had appeared on the bandage. It wasn't bleeding profusely or anything like that. So obviously that was a big mystery to her. So she went back down to the doctors and showed him, and the way they reacted, they were absolutely fascinated. They said, well, what have you done? Have you fallen over and impaled yourself on something during the night? She just said, and they confirmed to her that this hole went right through her arm from one side to the other. Now, of course, that left lasting scars. She's still got the 2 scars on her, which she sent me, I've seen, and also got numerous detailed colour photographs of. So it's left 2 dark, kind of brownish, round scars, one on each side of her arm where this was. But yeah, the doctor was checking her arm, for nerve damage. He was amazed by the fact that it wasn't causing any pain. You have to think this. It just seems like too much of a coincidence that she would have this object removed from her hand, and then within the next day, this bizarre injury occur that she couldn't account for. She said there was nothing in her house that she would have fallen on. And of course, let's say you're walking around. Let's say you did sleepwalk, which she's not prone to, but let's say she did get up out of bed and go wandering around and fell onto something sharp. Surely that would wake you up and you'd be in agony. That didn't happen. She just woke up in the morning and didn't realise there was anything wrong at all. So, without a doubt, one of the most extreme body injuries I've seen potentially related to contact in the 11 years of investigation I've done directly. And it's probably more extreme than most cases I've actually read about on record as well. Yeah, so fascinating.
So these contacts are still going on with this lady?
Yeah. Her last experience, as she accounted to me, was earlier this year, when she woke up with numerous beings in the room, including so the classic alien, which a lot of the time I call them alien, call them what you will, that she saw were those known as the greys, so the large black slanted eyes, oversized heads, quintessential archetypal view of what an alien would look like. There are other types as well that are seen almost just as much as greys, that are less in the public's perception. So there were a few of those in the room, but there was also this other one that It was essentially a grey still, but had very, very distinct different features. Had very, very wrinkled skin and this more of a heart-shaped head with a kind of indentation in the top. Now, these particular types of beings have been seen in other contact cases, other ones that I've investigated, and other ones on record, including the infamous A71 case from up Scotland, where two gentlemen got abducted from their car. They saw these beings, and they've almost always got very wrinkled skin and a very distinct head shape.
Like
so they have. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, just a different type, and they're usually kind of brownish in colour, sort of darker tanned colours, rather than the sort of light grey or light bluish grey colour that the greys tend to be. So very interesting. But again, they've got the black eyes, so they appear to be related, sort of like a subspecies. But that would be just speculation, of course.
So, what did they say to her? You said they seem to have a sort of dialogue with her.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it depends which experience you're talking about, but let me go into one of the more dramatic experiences she recollected, and this involves the hybrids, which I believe we discussed last year on your program. This is where the beings appear to be mixing their DNA with human DNA and creating these sort of hybrid creatures that are half alien, half human, if you will. The exact reason why they're doing that, we don't know. Obviously, some people find that deeply disturbing and feel that at some point they're going to take over the planet with these things, or maybe attempt to populate another planet with. And that's the message that Tina got from her experiences with these beings. But in one such encounter, she awoke to find herself on a metallic bench-like table. This is very, very standard classic abduction type scenario. So she was in this dome-shaped room. There was a indistinct light source coming down from above, and she believed she was naked at first, and she was in this small kind of holding room. And she said it was very, very. There was the sense that there were presence of beings in the room, but she couldn't really see them. The light was very bright. Then her view shifts, and she finds herself in this new location. And she could see a bit clearer, and it was a much larger room that she was in. So she'd been transported elsewhere. Essentially, she doesn't know how. There were a number of beings around her, and in the darkness, she could see something across the far side of the room. There were these rows of things. She was allowed to get up. She wanted to get up. A lot of the time, contactees, when they have these experiences, they are paralyzed, and I believe that's done on purpose by the beings to prevent them from attacking the beings or panicking and running around, and they'll shut them down. But as an individual's experiences continue throughout their life, sometimes they'll allow the individual to move around freely, and I believe that may be down to a trust level with them, where they feel they can trust them not to panic or lash out or anything, and that they're going to be able to handle the situation. That's just speculation, but that's just an observation from what I've seen. In some repeat cases, when they're a child, they'll be paralyzed, but later on they'll find they can move around. So she asked permission of the beings there, to get up, to go and have a look at what was across the other side of the room that she could see in this dim light in the distance. And the beings essentially allowed her to get up off the bench. So she stepped up. She was walking forward. She still felt like a bit drugged, had this kind of sort of a bit giddy, and a lot of the time people will feel that they won't feel in the normal self. So she felt a bit like she was sedated, but she was able to walk forwards, and out of the gloom came these rows of black egg-shaped objects down on the ground, a few foot high, and there were rows and rows and rows of them. And the bank nearest her had 3 of these objects on, and there was red lights coming from within inside the centre. This is all things she recollected in the morning, directly following the experience. She continued to get closer to these egg-shaped objects, and they appeared to be made out of a sort of black glass, or similar to glass. She could sort of partially see through them, but it was smoky. And inside the centre of each one, near to this red light, she could see a baby inside each of these things, and at that realization, she realized that there were hundreds of these babies inside these egg-shaped objects in the room. And further away amongst these objects was another another being had darker coloured skin. This one to the other ones that were there alongside her, and it seemed quite angry that she got up. And she, it seemed angry with her, like she wasn't supposed to be there, like she wasn't supposed to see this. She got a sensation of anger from it. These beings usually taught telepathic with individuals and express emotions to them directly, and that's what she got from this being without it sort of saying anything directly to her.
So why was this being angry at her? She
has no idea. She's no idea why that particular one was angry with her. She just sensed anger from it, like she wasn't supposed to be doing what she was doing, as in getting up and going over and having a look at them. Now, why it would be angry when there's other ones in the room that appear to be allowing her to do this, we can just speculate. But she was pulled backwards and taken back to this bench and laid back down. At this point, one of the this being with the darker coloured skin, it approached her, and it had what appeared to be a blanket or something in its arms. It pulled away the blanket, and in its arms was a little girl, a baby girl, not entirely human, had black eyes and sort of larger head than usual, but she recognised it as her own daughter. This is very, very standard. I've dealt with a number of contact cases where this has occurred, and it's some sort of bonding ritual between the individual that they've taken the DNA from and what they've created with that DNA, and they're trying to establish some sort of emotional connection. I think it seems to be what they do it for, and they usually they'll bring it to the mother or sometimes the father, and allow them to hold the baby for a period of time, and they will recognise it, as their own. As their own, they'll treat it like their own son or daughter, even though it looks distinctly different. And she was able to hold it a while, and she realised that there were all these babies inside the egg-shaped things were essentially clones of her small babies that have been created from her DNA. She doesn't know how she knows this. She had this innate feeling that all of them were her, essentially, hundreds and hundreds of clones of her. And she was told by one of the beings there that they were to populate another planet that they were going to take these elsewhere in the universe and populate a planet with them. It was really, 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 really in-depth experience. I'm only going the high-level details here. We talked for hours now about this one particular incident, and the amount of detail that she could recollect from it. And it sounds so, you hear these things and it sounds so fantastical. You have to say, well, surely that's just got to be a dream, but the emotional impact from it afterwards, the emotions you sense and everything, it can really change individuals, and it's not the only experience she's had, of course. They've gone on throughout her life, so you'd have to either put it all down to dreams, or potentially that we're dealing with something very, very real here.
The interesting thing about it, from what you're saying, is that, when you hear of a classic UFO case, someone's regressed under hypnosis and they go back through what happened, and that's how they found out about, the procedures, etc. But it sounds like this lady is conscious throughout. She's allowed to walk around the ship, and she has a conscious recollection when she comes back. And obviously she's got these injuries as well to kind of back it up. Does she know why she's allowed to remember it? Does that play a part in maybe the bonding with these creatures?
No, she hasn't been told why she's allowed to remember. Some of her recollections are fragmented. So there's periods of time where she'll black out and then she'll come round. As I said, when she was moved between the two locations, she's in the first area, and then the light increased in brightness, and then all of a sudden she finds herself in this other area. So there is sections of her experiences that cut out, but as yet she hasn't been hypnotically regressed. That's something we plan to do in the coming months. So she is interested in being regressed. There's certain experiences she's had involving missing time. One dramatic experience that she had back in her teenage years. I think it was late teenage years, 19, I think. She had, believe it or not, 4 days of missing time. 4 entire days.
Wow, you got to provide a good excuse to your boss for that one, haven't you?
Well, she didn't, and she lost her job. What happened was she'd gone out to work, and she was on her way home. She was feeling a bit tired, but she wasn't feeling ill in any way. She got into her flat and decided to go and take a lie down. It's still in her work clothes. Next thing she know, her boyfriend's hammering away at the front door. She thinks he's come round with some evening food for her, or whatever. Goes and opens the door, and he starts yabbering about how 4 days have gone by. And at first, she thinks he's joking, and she checks the clock and everything and checks the date, and 4 days has passed. She has no recollection of what happened during that time. However, her workplace had attempted to contact her numerous times, had rang her phone, and she hadn't stirred through that. And she basically lost 4 days of her life. She's got no recollection of what happened during that time. Now, you could put it down to some kind of medical condition, but she'd never experienced anything like it before. She's never experienced anything like it since. And whatever it was, she didn't stir from it. So she was either very, very deeply asleep or wasn't there, which is, of course, a possibility. Unfortunately, nobody went round to the house in that time to see whether she was or wasn't there. So she'd fallen out with her mother at the time, so they weren't on good speaking terms. Hence why her mum didn't go round and just break down the door, or whatever. So yeah, it's a big mystery. So we do want to investigate that under hypnosis and see if she has any recollection of anything during that time.
The interesting thing is, being in Southampton, I mean, I've been there quite a few times. It's quite a big city.
Yes.
And imagine she lives in quite an urbanised area. Someone must have presumably spotted a flying saucer, UFO, whatever you want to call it, over her house or nearby. There must be quite a few sightings. I mean, I remember...
Unless it's cloaked.
Yeah, there was a guy... What comes to mind is there's this guy in Southampton area. I can't remember exactly where. I saw this on YouTube. I think his name was Anthony.
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
you know,
I've seen this. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen his footage.
Streams of UFO videos he had, and then suddenly he just disappeared off because I think
Anthony
he
Wood
didn't want the attention. And it's like maybe some of the UFOs he's been filming could have been something to do with this lady. I don't know, but I just thought it's a bit of a hot spot by the sound of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just speaking with somebody else who'd had a sighting down over Portsmouth, Portsdown Hill, quite recently as well. So, but I mean, as I say, I've dealt with lots of cases from around Birmingham, and there's probably just as many cases in other towns. So anywhere can look like a hot spot when you start to investigate lots of cases. Yeah, if I talk back to back about all the cases I've investigated around the Birmingham area, a lot of people would make the assumption, wow, Birmingham must be a hot spot, but it's not really. It's just that I'm doing dedicated research in this area. I think if you went to any town, absolutely, yeah. I think you'd find just as many cases in other areas. And a few years back, I decided to plot all my cases on a map just to see the spread of the cases. And I found some amazing things. I found two cases, for example, that were years and years apart, completely separate witnesses, had they didn't know each other at all. They were not connected in any way, but they both reported seeing a black triangular-shaped craft at either end of a single road in Birmingham. It's separated by years, but it was a really, really similar description of the craft type. Just both from, one from one end of the road and 1 year later from the other end of the road. Maybe it was hanging around that area, who knows? But you find interesting patterns like that when you start looking into it.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's almost like as if the ship's time travelled a year or two and picked someone else at the same destination or something.
Absolutely.
Now, you've mentioned the fact that there's a lot of people that are questioned the validity of their cases, and it's because they haven't got any photographs and things like that. Now, obviously, this Southampton lady, she's getting regularly abducted. The skeptic's point of view would say, well, why doesn't she take her mobile phone with her? And so when she gets taken aboard a ship, snap, she can come through with a few pictures of the greys to show everybody. What would you say to that kind of question? And you said that you've got lots of other reasons why people don't always get photographs of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's one of the ongoing arguments, isn't it, that in this modern day and age when everybody's got smartphones in their pockets and all that, where's all the incredible close-up UFO photos and videos? Well, I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of contact cases and UFO sightings now over the years. Probably at least about 1,000 cases, and I can probably count on two hands the number of videos that I've actually received over the years in doing those cases. Now, every single time I'll ask individuals, did he get any photographs or videos? Yeah. I mean, obviously, that would be a standard question. But time and time again, they'll come back with different responses for reasons why they didn't. Yeah. There's lots and lots of different reasons why this doesn't happen. Yeah. You first have to look at how the actual objects behave. Yeah. A lot of sightings are a big distance. Yeah. Or they are over very quickly. So somebody will see something shoot across the sky in a few seconds flat, yeah, giving you absolutely no time to get their camera out in the first place, yeah. Let's say there's a longer sighting. Well, in a lot of cases, especially with more close cases, which would create better footage, a close encounter, yeah, the individual is right down at the bottom of their list of priorities, getting their phone out and taking a photograph of it or video of it, yeah. Most of the time, the individual will be in a state of shock by what they're looking at. They'll just be absolutely absorbed by the experience itself. They're not thinking, oh, I better get my phone out to make sure I get the evidence here to prove to the world this is real, because for them it is real because they're undergoing it at the time. Yeah, they're not thinking I'm going to get the evidence to pass on to a ufologist or whatever. You know, they're just experiencing and awestruck by what they're seeing. Yeah. Now there's just as many cases on record where the individual acts in an abnormal way. Yeah, this happens time and time again, and I believe, is a very, very definite and real part of these experiences. Yeah, I believe that these occupants of these craft have the ability to alter people's perception so that the individual won't question what's happening to them. And this is what's happened with Tina's experiences. Some of the time, she undergoes the experience, but at the time she doesn't feel like she needs to ask questions or anything. She feels like she already has the answers to those questions in her mind, yeah. And then when she wakes up after the experience or whatever and comes back to the normal world, shall we say, she thinks to herself, oh, why didn't I ask these questions at the time? You know, she just kind of tends to accept it while the experience is going on. And this is reported again and again and again, and not just with contact cases, but I would say predominantly with contact cases this occurs. They appear to be kind of altering their mind some way, so they'll act in an abnormal way. A classic example of that is Jenny's case, which I actually spoke with you about the first time I spoke on Peep Show Radio. It was where she looked out of a window. I think if you recall me describing this last time, she looked out of a window and there was a craft in the distance, and then it moved very, very close to her house. It was, within 100 feet of the house, and it's the middle of the night. She's there standing awake, and her family's around her asleep. And in that situation, what would you logically do in that situation? You'd certainly wake your family up. You'd be like, wow, look at this, there's something outside. You might be terrified. You might ring the police. You might ring the ambulance, anything. There's lots of different things that you may think of doing. You might run out screaming out of the house. And she didn't do any of those things. She just essentially just said, okay, there's a UFO outside or whatever, and just went straight back to bed. For her at that time, it became completely acceptable that there was this strange object with a glowing band of lights in close proximity to her house. And then soon after that, she had an abduction experience, which I went into in depth last time, so I won't cover again now. But it was a classic case. And there's many, many cases like that. There's another example is a UFO sighting that I almost got involved with. Actually, this one's quite interesting. I think you'll find this one interesting indeed. This happened at the Radleys which is close to Solihull, area known as Sheldon, Birmingham, South Birmingham. And it involved my friend and other witnesses. So my friend was on his way across mine on a bus at the time. And it's evening time, but still quite light. And he looks at the left side of the bus, and he sees what appears to be a police helicopter with what appears to be a black ball or sphere hanging under it. And he thinks some sort of weird camera equipment maybe hanging under the helicopter. As the bus continues along the road, the angle shifts, and he realizes that the ball is not attached to the helicopter. It's in fact free floating, and the helicopter appears to be hovering alongside it, taking a good hard look at what it is and kind of shifting around it. Now, he only sees it for a couple of seconds. My friend, his name's Chris, by the way, he's regularly come down Bufog. He's fascinated by UFOs, as I am. And he's got a mobile phone in his pocket. Yeah. Does he go to take a photograph? No. He just looks at it, and then as soon as he's gone past in the bus and it's out of sight, he immediately thinks to himself, why on earth didn't I take my camera out and take a photograph of it? and he's
kick himself.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's an individual who's interested in the subject, yeah. And it should have been at the forefront of his mind, but for whatever reason, it wasn't. Yeah, now you could put that down to just being fascinated by what he was looking at, or you could put it down to some sort of mind control that was going on there.
I think you're right, Dave, with the mind control, and you're probably aware of some of the American cases where people have kind of multiple abduction experiences, and what they do, they try and trick the aliens by having like an ongoing camera filming them as they sleep, and then they kind of like they realise that what's going on is they'll wake up, and they'll only kind of view this afterwards. Something will get them to wake up, walk over to the camera, switch it off. That's when the abduction happens.
Absolutely.
Then they switch it back on again, and they've got the footage of them walking up and switching the camera on and off, but not what's in between.
Yeah, which is, absolutely, that would be clear evidence suggesting that the beings were taking control of them and were fully aware that they set up a camera. Which doesn't always happen. Again, I discussed video footage last time, again with Jenny's case, where she appeared to sort of dematerialise from the bed, and is still open to investigation, that piece of footage.
So did Tina kind of get a feeling or vibe of them being positive or negative or neutral or apathetic?
Most of them she feels are quite neutral and don't have much emotion to them. They seem almost like drones or robots. However, there's one particular being, and this is again a common aspect of contact, is that the individual will often bond specifically with a particular being, usually a grey type, sometimes Nordic or one of the other types I've seen. And this happened with her case. Yeah, there's one particular being who has turned up in lots and lots of experiences. He's not always there, and I say he because she senses he's male. Yeah, greys don't appear to have any particular sex, but she gets the feeling that it's male. She speaks of him as her friend. Yeah, she says he's the one that knows me. That's what she refers to him as. She doesn't know his name, but he's been there with a lot of her experiences, and she's held numerous conversations with this particular being. And she's seen lots of other greys, and in some of her experiences there's been sort of 20 or 30, big groups of them, big crowds of them, just appearing to get on with menial tasks around the craft, and they'll be touching sort of buttons and panels and this sort of thing, just getting on with things. And in some experiences, she's actually seen sort of groups of them with one taller one that appeared to be kind of teaching the smaller ones essentially. It's absolutely fascinating. There's kind of some sort of hierarchical structure she's observing there. And again, that particular aspect, I've dealt with other cases where very similar things have been reported, where there'll be one being that'll be in charge. Won't always be the same type of entity either. Sometimes it can be a different species or type, that appears to be watching over them.
So it really doesn't feel like they're here to kill us, but they're here to meddle with us in some way.
And how it feels like from the case I've looked into and read about over the years is essentially a big ongoing genetic science project of types. Yeah, and it tends to suggest that we may have been our evolution may have been influenced by these beings, or even if you take it to its extremes, that we've been created by them here on Earth and they're just watching over us. And that would and if you look at it from that perspective, people often ask, if they're here, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, that's why they don't land on the White House lawn, because they're studying us over long periods of time and looking at how our genetics change. Now, there's a clear evidence from having a look at contact cases that they appear to be studying particular family trees. Yeah? So what you'll get numerous generations of a family will all experience contact, and it'll usually be down one side of the family. So it might be down the mother's side, and the grandmother will have contact, and then her daughter would have contact, and her daughter's daughter has contact experiences. But the other side of the family don't really have those experiences, or they may occasionally be indirectly involved. So they may potentially have been there at the time and also been taken alongside the other individual, just seemingly just because they were there at the time with them. In other cases, they will specifically shut down the individuals that they want to shut down. So they have a way of switching people on and off, which is quite disturbing when you think of it.
It is very, very disturbing.
There's lots of cases where the individuals woke up and they'll be sleeping alongside somebody, and of course they'll be terrified by what's happening. Let's say they wake up and there's beings standing in the room. Well, obviously that's extremely frightening. Now, as I said earlier, sometimes the individual will be paralyzed and they can't do anything, and that of course feeds into other potential explanations, including sleep paralysis. I'm going off on a tangent there, but yeah. When they can move, they'll sometimes try to wake their spouse or whatever, and they'll be shaking them and hitting them, and they'll be out cold. It's like they've been switched off, So they'll be shouting in their ear and punching into their arm to try to wake them up, and they won't stir. It's like they've been shut down, so that they can't interact or stop what's occurring with the experience, or perhaps witness it, because by all accounts, these beings certainly are working covertly, I would say. It's an interesting parallel to that is you've got these big cases on record, such as the infamous Phoenix Lights incident from 1997, where they've quite clearly exposed themselves very, very publicly by flying a craft, right over the middle of a city. It's been seen by hundreds of people. You have to wonder why they would do that if they're working covertly. It's almost like on that particular occasion, they must have been aware, surely must have been aware that they would have been seen by people from the ground and intercepted by military and that sort of thing, which is exactly what happened.
Do you think there's a battle between those who want this to be known to the public and those who don't, both on the alien side and the human side?
I think if any of the alien species that are visiting us, and there do appear to be numerous species, I think if any of those species reported wanted to be known, they could quite easily do so by just appearing over our city capitals or whatever, and they haven't done that, tending to suggest that at the moment they wish to remain covert. There are cases on record where they appear to be quite public, but I don't think it's any surprise that most UFO sightings happen either in the dead of night or in very rural locations, like in the middle of deep woodland.
I mean, it comes to mind a lot of footage from South America. I think it's like Brazil or something like that, like Peru, or, in these cities where there seem to be absolute loads of spherical UFOs in the sky, just hanging there, and people are videoing them. I think there was a case where they all went out to film the
eclipse. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the eclipse footage.
And they happened to capture all these UFOs hanging in the sky, which quite openly seen by many people.
Yes.
So that's a case where they don't seem to be mined, unless there's some sort of effect of the eclipse that throws off their cloaking device off kilter or something. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there could be numerous reasons for why they'd appeared at that time. A lot of people question why, if they're working covertly, how come their craft are a lot of the time covered in rainbow flashing lights and this sort of thing? But it's essentially trying to humanize something that isn't human. And you also have to remember that the beings are intelligent. Yeah, they appear to possess intelligence equal to ours. Very likely more advanced than ourselves. They can talk telepathically. Their technology that they're flying around in is very, very advanced indeed. So if they're intelligent, they're probably going to be fully aware of how they are viewed here on the planet by humans. Yeah, and they're probably fully aware that if they are seen, that most people won't believe it anyway. Yeah, so there's probably cases where they've been seen, but they're probably thinking, well, it doesn't matter anyway because it's not going to prove anything. Somebody would report seeing that to myself or whatever, or somebody else, and we'd put out the details, and lots of people would be complacent to it. Some people would be fence sitters. Some may believe it. Other people may be completely skeptical to it, and that's just the way it always is. And the only thing that would ever change that, really, for the large part, is if full disclosure with a big D occurred. And by that, I mean our governments of the world coming out and saying, this is real, and presenting live ETs, in front of everybody, allowing the scientists of the world to study these and study their technology and everything quite openly. And there wouldn't be any question then. But there are so many reasons why that would not occur and why it would be ridiculous to even think that something like that would occur without major pressure from the public to do so.
I actually wonder, when you described the lady in Southampton, she sees the people, the creatures walking around the craft, operating the buttons, pressing this, that and the other, keeping the craft going. A little sneaking suspicion just crept into my mind, wondering if that is actually all a genuine in the sense it's a genuine experience for her. But are the ETs, the extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, are they putting on a bit of a show of this background of this what appears to be a craft because it fits in with our concepts of beings from other planets, when in fact it may not be that at all? You know, that she could be inside someone's mind or something, but they give this holographic illusion of being in a craft just because it fits more comfortably, even though it's uncomfortable, it fits more comfortably with our notions of space, time, and planets. In the same way that, say, a bird watcher who wants to watch birds covertly might disguise himself partly in a kind of a small bunker that's camouflaged or something like that.
Absolutely.
To look like a tree or a bush or something like that to watch them. Or sometimes you've seen it on these David Attenborough documentaries where they want to mingle with the penguins, and so they actually put a penguin, a robotic kind of penguin with a camera in it, to mingle with the group, so it doesn't upset them. And it makes you wonder if the ETs or whatever are doing something similar in their own kind of way that settles us down a bit.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about things settling down there, so that kind of links into the whole screen memories aspect of experiences. But before we get there with that, let's stay on focus of what we're talking about here. So essentially, making people more complacent. It's entirely possible that the beings are not aliens, as you say. You know, they may be lying about their origin. In some contact cases, they've directly said to the individual, you know, we're from this star system, and they've shown them a monitor or whatever, or an image in their mind of a particular star system or planets or whatever. And people have even had deep recollections of actual planetary surfaces where they've seen themselves sort of flying across this alien landscape, which is fascinating, you know, and maybe, you know, it's what's known as information download, where they'll get, you know, information or visions or whatever projected directly into their mind, and there are numerous cases on record where they've seen that, you know, what appears to be another planet, perhaps the planet where these beings are from. But yeah, absolutely. How do we know that the beings themselves are being honest with that, you know, and maybe they've got a different origin and they're just pretending to be alien?
Well, the thing is, these days it's probably more likely to be interdimensional rather than interplanetary.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm afraid, guys, we've got to take a break now. The first hour's just raced through. I think we've all got missing time now. So we'll take a break and we'll be back after these messages.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
Hi, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Andrew Chaplin, and Neil Geddes-Ward, and we're talking to David Hodrien of the Birmingham UFO Group. Now, just before we went to the break, Dave was telling us an interesting story to do with one of his members who was on a bus and sighted a helicopter that seemed to be running parallel to a sphere of some sort in the sky, and his friend actually forgot to take his phone camera out to get any actual pictures of it, so we started to talk about that. So, Dave, can you kind of catch us up to where we left off, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we were talking about how people sometimes act in weird ways, and the lack of photo and video evidence out there. And I think there's lots of different reasons, you know. And I've spoken with literally hundreds of people over the years, you know. And as I said, I've got very, 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 very few actual sort of UFO photographs, or even fewer videos, and even then they're usually quite distant ones, you know. So I think it's very good reasons that in this day and age, despite the number of smartphones that are out there, there's lots of different reasons that mean that there aren't that many great videos. And even if there were some really great videos out there, they'd get swamped by an absolute mass of hoax videos that are now on the internet. That's a whole other topic, you know. We'll go on a side tangent. Okay, yeah. So back to the black sphere. Yeah. So he immediately rings me up, still on the bus. Doesn't know why he didn't get off the bus, but by this time he's a couple of roads away. Yeah. So decides that he's going to stay on the bus. He's on his way over to mine, and it was only another 10 minutes to my house here. So he rings me up and it tells me what he's just seen. Obviously, as soon as he arrives, I'm straight away, well, let's get back out there. Maybe it's still there. So we head up there in the car. Yeah. Now, by this time, it started to get darker. It wasn't fully dark, but the sun had definitely dropped. And we got back up there to the Radleys, and the helicopter was still there. Yeah. But sadly, no object. Yeah. Now, the helicopter was just doing sort of typical patrols, yeah, kind of moving around. It looked like it was looking around for something around the area. That it could have been looking for the object, or may have been just doing I wouldn't jump to conclusions and say it was looking for the object, but it was still around. But we're out there for a number of minutes, so about 10 minutes, having a good old look and making sure it's definitely gone, seeing if there's any other witnesses around to speak with. There was nobody else out there on the street at that particular time. But while we're out there, we suddenly realise there's not that many planes in the sky. In fact, doesn't appear to be any planes. The Radleys is just along from. We're getting some feedback there. Is that okay?
Where's it coming from? I couldn't hear anything.
Hello?
Can you hear us? Oh, hang on.
Hello?
Hello, is that coming through? There's some odd feedback again.
I couldn't hear any feedback. I heard a bit of a clicking noise.
There was weird crackling down this end.
I think we're being listened into. Seriously, I think this is somebody trying to bugger things up.
Well, there you go. Yeah, Men in Black. They're onto us. Okay. Anyway, so we had a look, and there didn't appear to be any planes in the sky. Now the Radleys is right in the flight path for Birmingham International Airport. Yeah, and there's regular planes coming into land, taking off, and that. And it was clear that there weren't any planes, and that was very, very unusual, of course. And it became apparent that they'd stopped the flights. There wasn't any flights going on. So that's rather interesting. So there's no object, so it takes a few photos of the helicopter, and then we head back for home. And I immediately put out a sort of breaking news story on the Bufo website, just to see if there's anybody out there looking around to see if anybody else has seen it. Yeah. Now this has been successful in the past on numerous occasions, and indeed on this time it was also successful, as what happened was the following morning somebody else got back in touch, straight away messaged me and said, yeah, I've seen the breaking news message on the website. I was out there, I saw the object too. Yeah. Now he reported that the object had been stationary for about 50 minutes while this police helicopter performed manoeuvres around it, so they were quite clearly checking it out, and it appeared to be there for a long period of time. And in the end, he got bored of actually looking at the thing, and he decided to head off to a nearby shop. He turned his back on it, and he'd walked about 30 seconds, and when he turned back and looked around again, the object had gone. So it had vanished very, very fast. It left the area extremely quick within the space of 30 seconds. He doesn't know whether it shot away or whether it just vanished without trace. That was what he saw and reported. I got no reason to doubt his story, and it backed up what my friend had said he'd seen. We later on, a couple of months later, got a third witness came forward. Now, sadly, this one never got back to me, probably just because he was scared about talking. A lot of people, when I speak with them, they're very, very paranoid about talking about these experiences and feel that they're going to in some way be in trouble, or Men in Black or whoever going to knock on their door, and there's going to be some sort of negativity come about from it. So a lot of the time they're willing to share initial details with me, but that's it, and I'll go back to them, and they won't ever sort of answer the phone or respond to emails. But this, so all we got was this one statement of somebody else that said they were also out there, and they said that they'd seen the object shoot away really, really fast in a particular direction, which was very interesting. But sadly, we couldn't follow it up to get any further details than that. But it's down there in the as part of the case anyway. So I decided the following morning after the experience to ring up Birmingham International Airport, because it was obvious there wasn't any planes in the air. And I spoke with somebody known as an environmental officer. It was a lady, and I spoke with her, and she was able to confirm to me that they had indeed stopped the planes due to a danger in the air. I said, okay, what was this danger? And she said that there had been a kite reported. And I said to her, kites, okay. And she confirmed that a police helicopter had been sent up to investigate. And I asked, could I speak with the pilots of the helicopter, and she said absolutely not. So it was a bit of a dead end. But I mean, let's put it together here. You know, would they really stop the planes for a night just because of a kite? And our kites are black spherical objects that hover motionless for 50 seconds and then vanish extremely quick. I mean, surely if it was a kite, it would be tethered, and all they would have to do is walk up to the person flying said kite and said, "Can you not do that? You're in a flight path." And that didn't happen. So the kite explanation seems rather dubious to me, all things considered.
It's a bit more advanced, I suppose, than swamp gas.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that was essentially where we got to with the case, you know, but it's quite fascinating. And as I said, one that directly involved one of my friends, you know, who's got an interest in the subject. So,
interestingly enough, when I lived in the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland, I got to know people that worked for the SE Rescue thing up there on a kind of payment or voluntary basis. And they were told that every time they launch one of those helicopters, it costs in the region of about £10,000 to launch it. You know, even if it's like just a 15-minute flight or whatever. So I'm assuming a police helicopter's got to be in a similar region of money. You know, quite a few £1,000s. You know, to launch it and then fly it for God knows how long. And then presumably, if you're going to ground a lot of aircraft as well, like Birmingham International Airport or whatever, you're then putting a lot of pressure on airlines. Then they're not actually making money at that point.
Indeed.
So it's a hell of a lot of money that's being costed for a kite. That's the logic of it.
Now, obviously looking into that aspect as to why did they ground the planes, obviously they'll sometimes ground the planes for bad weather conditions. But, you know, looking at the weather charts, and we could find absolutely no, you know, there was no sign that there was going to be any bad weather that night. And indeed, it was a very clear night. You know, there wasn't any fog crept in or anything, you know, that would have been, you know, so that as an explanation, I did look into that, you know, just in case that was the potential explanation. So it's all very suspicious, really, you know, but as I said, I hit brick walls, which is what often happens, especially when you try talking with, you know, official bodies to try to get extra information. Take, for example, contacting the MOD, you know, they won't tell you anything. You know, they just come out with the not of defence significance answer, and that's basically their, like, response to shut up, and we don't want to talk to you any further about it, really.
I don't suppose you guys saw recently there was a UFO spotted quite close to Heathrow as well. That was literally yesterday.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was one in Ireland, or am I confusing places?
Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, that was the one where they were radioing in about seeing the object up in the air with the audio.
Yeah, no.
Is it connected?
But maybe there's two separate incidences.
I think it's two separate, yeah.
Yeah, but this Heathrow one, I put it on my Facebook wall somewhere. But definitely, multiple pilots were reporting some kind of strange object or strange light that they can't explain near Heathrow. Now, interestingly, he will remain nameless, but I have a friend of mine who is actually an airline pilot for a major airline, and he has actually seen something quite weird. It was 2009, and it was over northern France. I won't give the airline, but it's one of the major airlines within Europe. And he said he was flying over, and he saw three coloured objects, three lights. He said they were quite big balls, and he said that how they were static, and he said that it was impossible for them to be like that. No object should be static. It should be, because he was flying a fair distance away, but he could see them, and they were, I think he said they were kind of red or green or blue, different coloured flashing lights in a kind of like a triangular formation. And he says that no object should be able to stand there completely static. And he actually got contacted by French ground control, the aviation, to ask what they were seeing and what was going on. He was actually asked to log it as well, and after that he basically didn't hear from it again. Now I asked him, is there an official policy within your airline from up on high to not talk about it or keep it secret in some way? He actually said no. He actually said that there's no kind of policy on not talking about it. So whether it's an unwritten thing or whether because from what, I don't know if you get this, Dave, but there's some interviews I've heard where US pilots have been specifically told not to talk about it. So it could be US side, they're told not to talk about it, and maybe European side, there's either no policy or you just an unwritten rule that you don't do it because otherwise you're going to lose your job, kind of thing. He very much took it in his stride. He basically logged it. He said it was definitely there. He said it was definitely not anything. It was not a helicopter. It was not a blimp. It was not another plane. It wasn't an illusion, because he'll be aware of things like optical illusions, for instance, anything like sun flare or things like that. He'll be aware of that. He's trained in that. He said there was absolutely no explanation for it. So I don't know what you make of that, Dave.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a number of years back at one of the conferences I went to, seeing a retired jumbo jet pilot. He'd had a incredible sighting of two massive silver disc-shaped objects that flew under his aircraft in broad daylight. And I remember him saying in that lecture that most pilots will, at some point of their career, see something, which when you think about it, isn't that surprising, to be fair, because they're up there, they're above the cloud layer, it's clear sky, they can see for miles and miles usually. So, and he said they are told not to talk about it. There are a number of cases on record where pilots have gone on to talk about things and then been fired. A case that springs to mind is the absolutely incredible 1680 Alaska flight, which is one of the most infamous and stunning aerial cases on record.
Was it mentioned on the Disclosure Project by the?
It was indeed, yes, that's correct. Yeah. He said the radar recordings were confiscated by unknown individuals in suits.
FBI or something.
Yes,
like that.
that's what they claimed. They claimed to be from the FBI, but of course it's easy for them to claim they're from anywhere, you know. But yeah, I mean that case was absolutely breathtaking. I mean that was the aircraft. It got followed by an object that was absolutely ginormous, you know, multiple battleships in size compared to them, a massive walnut-shaped object that followed the plane for a period of time and performed manoeuvres staying in the same position, and other smaller objects that came from it and flew up in front of the cockpit, and they could feel the heat coming from the lights from these objects. And you know, they had the audio recordings of them contacting the airport and then confirming that there were numerous objects on radar. And when the pilot got down, Japanese pilot, got back down on the ground, they said, you're not allowed to talk about this. He went to talk. He was so excited by what he'd seen, of course. I mean, you would be, wouldn't you? He spoke with the papers about it, and he lost his job over it. And there's numerous cases like.
Explains why I've seen this Oriental gentleman working for Ryanair now. Very Bob Lazar, as they say in the world of UFOs.
Indeed.
Talking of which, you got some information about Bob Lazar, and for those that don't know about Bob Lazar, do you want to sort of tell our listeners who Bob Lazar is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, Bob Lazar was a rocket physicist who worked at the Area 51 base. It's been proven, they found him on employee records from the base. He was a very, very intelligent man. Big very high level educational background. And he worked there on the base as a rocket physicist. Now, famously, Bob Lazar came out with some incredible statements in the 90s. He claimed to have worked on the base on a back-engineered spacecraft that had begun with the infamous crash at Roswell. He claimed that they'd back-engineered the craft from Roswell and found out how it was constructed and had rebuilt American flying saucers, essentially. He said that they were test flying them at the base, and that on particular nights you could see these test flights at a distance. And there have in fact been some videos uploaded over the years, of strange objects moving around over the base. Obviously at quite a distance because of the base perimeter, but which is they pushed back even more so that people could stop taking videos altogether. But in the early days of the base, the perimeter was near enough that you could actually see from the from nearby mountain peaks. You could see in the airstrip and the air over it, and at a distance you could see these objects lifting off and just performing left, right, zigzag type maneuvers and then settling back down. Bob claimed that these were these test craft, and he took out a number of people on numerous times to see these objects, and they sneaked out and went to a particular location with him. And there's numerous individuals who've gone on the record to say that this took place and that they did see, what appeared to be flying saucers being test flown at a distance. And one of the those individuals included members of his own family, other friends such as John Lear, who has himself come out with lots of different conspiracy theories in recent years. But yeah, it's an incredible case. It's got pros and cons to it. There's some ufologists who've picked holes in his story and don't believe it and believe that it's all fabricated. There are other people who believe that it may be elaborated, so it may have some truth to it, but also elaboration. And there are other people who fully believe that Bob Lazar's the real deal and that he really did work on his craft.
His story's never wavered, though, has it? He hasn't added to it. It's always remained the same. And someone said to him, "Did you see any grey aliens whilst working at Area 51?" And he always sort of said, "No, I didn't." He said, "I did see something small once as I went past an office.
Yep.
For a small person," he said. But
yes.
He said it wasn't long enough to really establish clearly what it wasn't. And he's always sort of maintained it. He's never sort of said, "Oh, yeah, it had big beady eyes," or anything. He always said it's just a small person. So that was interesting. But isn't there a new film or something coming out about him?
There is, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know
yeah, absolutely. This is a brand new documentary that's coming out about Bob Lazar's claims. Brand new one. It's by I forgot the guy's name now. I'm sorry, Corbin. Yeah. Corbin. It's all right. He's released previous documentaries before, and they're very, very high quality. Patient 17 was one of his documentaries. It's about one of the implants that was extracted by Roger Lear, and it's without a doubt the best documentary I've ever seen on the implant phenomena.
Not Jeremy then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Brexit implant, I think.
So yeah, he's a very good documentary maker. I've been very impressed by his previous work, and yeah, he's bringing out a brand new documentary on Bob Lazar, which I think is brilliant. It's good to bring that sort of back into the limelight.
What's your personal feeling on Bob Lazar? Because he's so controversial in the UFO world. Yes. It's very divisive. It seems to be a Marmite thing. You're either for him or you're against him.
I think that his story holds a lot of weight. I don't think he had that much to gain from saying the things that he said. As I said, he has already been proven to have actually worked at the base, so that's very interesting. I'm not saying that every aspect. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with sort of such incredible claims, incredible claims require incredible evidence, as I say. There is a lot of trust there with what he's saying. There's not that much physical evidence to back up what he's claiming, but it's certainly plausible that that would have been the location where they would have taken the craft, and I certainly believe that a craft did crash at Roswell. The amount of evidence of the Roswell crash is absolutely astronomical. There's hundreds of witnesses, deathbed testimonies, everything, and it's all pointing towards it being a craft with its occupants, that were obtained. Now, it stands to reason that they would have investigated that in great depth. They wouldn't have just gone and put it in a cardboard box and been like, let's forget all about that. They're going to want to see how it's built. They're going to want to try to weaponize it or use it for their own technology gains. So they would have studied that in great depth. At the time, the Area 51 base in Nevada was one of the most highly secret military establishments, and still is really. Although it's no longer a secret, obviously everybody knows Area 51, and for that reason, I believe that if they had alien technology at the base in the past, I believe that it would make perfect sense for it to no longer be there. Yeah. It's it's in the public perception, it's in the limelight. It was in films like Independence Day and that. So I think that if they did have anything alien in origin at the base in the past, I think it makes perfect sense that it would have been moved off to a lesser-known military base by now. But I'm not.
I've always wondered about this because I heard, they've moved it all now. It's in a different place, and you're thinking, how are they going to move all these flying saucers and everything out of flatbed trucks to a secret location? It's going to be quite a spectacle. But I actually wonder if the whole thing about Area 51 and then coming out with Bob Lazar and things like that is a thing literally to make us focus on it. And so that, it's like, watch the birdie. because it's actually happening somewhere else completely that we haven't even thought about.
Yes. I mean, what we do know at the base, they're certainly looking into black projects, yeah? They've got very advanced tech there that they're looking into. They're certainly extremely serious about people treading across the line. I mean, you can watch videos online that shows what happens when you do tread across the line. They do have the right to shoot you. They won't do that. They'll try and arrest you and then charge you thousands of dollars, you know. But I'd imagine if you ran across the line and started legging it towards the buildings, that they would probably put you down.
So paying the fine, doesn't it?
Well, indeed, yeah. And they're dead serious about it. So it's a very, very highly secretive base. But as to whether they're studying alien tech there today, or or have got actual ETs on base, who's to say? Yeah, maybe elsewhere.
I mean, the reports I heard about Area 51, that there's so many different things going about. And one of the things I remember, and this happens about other places as well, of various US military bases, is that there's greys working in unison with the humans. It's not just capture technology, but there's greys helping the humans develop the technology. So there's supposedly greys working at Area 51 as a sort of subterranean base, but also I think like a place like Dulce or whatever it was.
And there's a lot of claims to it.
There. I mean, John Lear has been talking about bases on the moon, for instance. I mean, I've recently seen some stuff about. He made a claim. I don't know how old this claim is. It was put up on the internet recently, but I think it could be years old. He supposedly said there's 250 million humanoid beings on the moon. Don't know where he gets that number from, or the facts, the proof, whatever like that.
Yes.
I mean, what's your thinking or take on that?
My take is that John Lear has released a lot of claims. There's all sorts of claims with not that much weight of facts to back them up. I would say be very, very careful. It's a distinct possibility that it's psyops and disinformation exercise. I mean, some of the things that he's claimed, it goes beyond that. He's previously talked about the Spire, which is apparently a mile-high structure that's supposedly on the moon. I've seen that there's photographic evidence, that back up some of his claims, but they don't back. I wouldn't say that they were definitely conclusive as being structures. There are photographs on the moon's surface where NASA appear to have airbrushed out certain sections of the photographs, and it's very interesting. You had to look at that, and you had to be why would they be airbrushing anything out on a lunar surface picture? But at the same time, the photographs that do supposedly show these buildings or artificial structures on the moon at a distance, I haven't seen any that I've been amazingly compelled, where I've thought that's definitely an artificial structure. But he claimed that there was this mile high thing called the Spire, I believe he called it, and it was apparently an antenna. It was commonly known as the Shard. That's how he referred to it. And it appeared to be massively high, and apparently it would collect souls of individuals. There's all sorts of claims, and you have. And you have to draw the line somewhere. I'm not saying that he didn't have a lot of very high level credentials, but I mean, his father himself built the Lear jet plane. So, and he had very, very high security clearance. That much is true. But there are other people who've gone on the record who've had very high ranking experience and have come out with claims that have been found to be bogus. Even deathbed testimonies, and it makes you wonder in these cases whether it's a disinformation exercise by the American government. You have to always take that on board. That they may be using the UFO story as a great cover for other things that they're working on. And they want people to think, oh yeah, it's got to be aliens. It allows them a cover to continue to develop stuff themselves that would make perfect sense. And that's by no means saying that the UFO subject isn't real. I'm saying that
something that I would find something I'd find difficult though is like you mentioned the deathbed confessions. Why was somebody on their deathbed lie about something like that?
Yeah. Yes.
So I think, could it be that they want to leave some kind of legacy behind, like they want to be remembered in some way? Neil, what do you think? What's your idea?
Well, there's been various CIA guys that are dying of this, that, and the other, and they've got tubes up their nostrils, and they're supposedly filmed and say, right, I work for Area 51, or I went and got the bits out of Roswell and whatever. if the CIA or FBI or whoever comes up to you and they know you're going to die of cancer in the next 6 months, and you might work for the military, they could say, look, we'll pay your funeral, we'll give you $500,000 or X amount of money to say this little script for us in a hospital bed, filmed by chosen people in the UFO community or whoever that we'll invite to come and film you. And that way, pay your funeral costs. Your wife or your kids or your family will have a bit of a legacy to live off if you just say this little pre-scripted whatever.
Yes.
And they won't have to worry about money ever again, sort of thing.
Exactly.
So that would be an incentive for someone. Not everyone would do it, but quite a few people might consider it, you see.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I mean, there are other people that are so ingrained in the military complex, that even right up to their deathbed, they may well be, used as a tool by the military, and they'd be happy to go along with that, and complacent in putting out false information right up to their death. I mean, one of the famous ones that's happened in recent years, Boyd Bushman, former Lockheed Martin engineer, right? Now, you think, okay, that's quite a high-ranking personnel there, I don't know if you've seen his testimony. He's released a long deathbed testimony.
Photographs of all these aliens.
Yes.
And
they took
his camera on board a ship, and there's Jupiter and Venus. Yeah, I know.
It's ridiculous. They've tracked down the model alien that he used in those photographs. It's a plastic model that you can buy on Earth. It's without a doubt a hoax. You have to wonder why this man, close to his death, would make this footage and be saying all this stuff. He claimed to have worked on the craft. He claimed to have been there at Roswell and everything else. It's all a hoax. So
has anyone come up with anything solid to say why he did it, or is
nobody knows why he would do that. All they could say is looking at it, it's quite obvious that the information he was putting out there was bogus, or at least partially bogus. Maybe he's mixing up truth with fiction.
Yeah, I did find it a bit odd when he said, "Oh, my friends, i.e. the aliens, they borrowed my little camera that's got film in it and took it in their craft, and they looked out the window and photographed. This is Venus. This is."
Exactly.
Out the shot that they'd taken of all the planets, they were kind of all perfectly up in line together, rather than
really bad,
parts of the solar system, but all these planets conveniently lined up within the shot. That's pretty good going for a photographer.
Yeah,
that's whatever.
Anybody who knows about the size of the solar system, will immediately be like, that's absolute nonsense. So it's almost like he was putting out, and he knew full well that anybody who looked into it would realise it was fake. And maybe he was doing that to muddy the waters. We'll never know. But the problem with that is before that point, really, or maybe before the ones that come before it that are of similar nature. A lot of people would always trust deathbed testimonies. For example, there's been deathbed testimonies from Roswell. Which I mentioned earlier on. A lot of people say deathbed testimony. That's really stunning evidence. Because they're on their deathbed, they've got nothing to lose. And their legacy, and why would they lie to their own families and this sort of thing. And you have to take all that into account. But here we've got what appears to be a deathbed testimony video. Well, it is. He's dead now. And it's quite clearly fabricated. So unfortunately, what that does is muddy the waters on deathbed testimonies being a definite form of evidence.
Yes, that's right. They probably went up to Boyd Bushman and said, "Hey, how do you fancy doing this April Fool trick?"
Yes.
He doesn't realise he's given a deathbed test. Because he was actually sitting on his office desk, if I recollect in one of the videos. Yes. And he looked quite able-bodied to me. He wasn't laying there on a life support machine. And it's probably afterwards they go and bump him off.
Yes. So it's very interesting, and of course, his credentials checked out. He was an engineer that worked at Lockheed Martin, who obviously worked on the stealth and that.
Now, interestingly, we talked about John Lear and the moon and things like that. Now, I do a talk. I've done this talk recently at a few places called Aliens on the Moon, and I've looked into the evidence for supposed aliens on the moon. And one argument that I would put forward to say that there possibly could be, I'm not saying there 100% is, but there a logical reason why there might be, is that if you think about, for instance, a parallel of, say, army bases from the UK or the US Air Force or whatever, we have small bases and units placed around the world in strategic positions.
Yes.
Like the British Army did have a major presence in Germany after the Second World War, right up until the last sort of 10 years or so, and they've only started to close a few of those bases recently. And likewise, America has got bases in Afghanistan and Iraq and all those places around there. And the reason they would do it logistically is that rather than each time they want to go and fight a battle or whatever, they've got their little units out there localized with pretty much enough equipment to do their battle for them, and they can resupply them if they want to, but they've got an arm in that section of the world, sort of thing.
Yes.
Now, logically thinking, aliens could do the same sort of thing, because there's always the argument of how can they get from there to here? It takes 15 million years and God knows what else, But if aliens have somehow managed to get here, rather than keep going all the way back to their home planet or wherever they come from, it would, if they got the technology, they could easily, presumably, put a base on the moon. And there was a guy called Carl Wolf, Sergeant Carl Wolf, who was back in the 1960s, was working for the, I think it's Langley Air Force Base. He was called in as a technician, a photographic technician. He went on the Disclosure Project to talk about this. And he was called in to go and repair a piece of photographic equipment because the normal guy that would normally do it wasn't there that day. So he was asked to go and do it. So he went into this thing, was sort of saying, I basically need to remove this piece of equipment to another building where I can actually see what I'm doing. And whilst they were sorting that out for him, he was speaking to another first-class airman, I think, like another technician in this place where they were basically getting photographs from like a lunar reconnaissance type orbiter going around the moon in the mid-60s, which was photographing the moon. And this guy says, by the way, we found a base on the backside of the moon. And this Carl Wolf guy immediately got a bit nervous, thinking, oh, my God, you're telling me something that I shouldn't really be hearing about. And he got really worried. But he thought, well, I'm going to hear about this, obviously, on the 6 o'clock news tonight. And he said that it never did appear on the 6 o'clock news. Now, recently, I've heard that Carl Wolf has actually just died in the last sort of like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes.
In an accident. Do you know anything about that one, Dave?
I mean, I heard the same as you, but I don't know anything more about it. I mean, to be fair, so many years have gone by, I wouldn't see that as particularly suspicious. I mean, people obviously sometimes can die in accidents, unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but not every single death involving somebody from, the world of ufology is going to be, suspicious. Sometimes it will just be an accident. So I wouldn't necessarily jump to conclusions.
Yeah. In fact, him dying creates more problems for them in one way, because it creates a bit more publicity that then gets out about saying, oh, this is the guy that talked about the alien base on the moon. Had it just gone on and on and on, most people probably just forgotten about him by then, because there's so many more cases that come to light. But his was one of the ones that kind of stood out as a bit of a shocker for me on the personal front, watching the Disclosure Project hearings of 2001, I think it was, they took place. And he was interviewed later, and he repeated the statement. He never added to it. He never subtracted it. There's always the same statement about how these pictures, he said he saw domes and structures and things like that on the photograph he was shown them. And he never actually went in to say who was responsible for building them, whether it was human bases on the moon or alien bases or Russian bases. He never said that. He just said, we found a base on the backside of the moon, which I thought was really interesting. That would be the logical place where to put it, because you never see the backside of the moon anyway from Earth. So it remains undetected unless you kind of fly some sort of probe around the moon and start scanning it and photographing it. So, interesting. But I've also heard of things about alien bases on Earth. Have you heard about that too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were discussing Dulce and that earlier on, which again is in depth ingrained in the worlds of conspiracy theory. Yes, but as you say, it seems very logical that they would have bases here on the planet, and a place that they may have them would be in the deepest depths of the ocean. So there's because right down there in the depths, it's unexplored, and there are a lot of cases on record of USOs or unidentified submerged objects, where fishermen and people out at sea on boats have seen what appears to be advanced objects with lights on moving around underneath the surface of the water, sometimes coming up out of the water or going back into the water. And I've even dealt with a couple of those cases myself. They're quite few and far between, of course. Being based in Birmingham, we don't get that many cases from the coast. But I have dealt with a couple of cases where people have seen the
canals. Then,
yeah, unidentified canal object.
The thing is, I've heard of these cases, and there's quite a few cases connected with some of the lakes, especially I think Lake Erie and Lake Montana in the US. Erie is a great name for a start.
Erie, yeah. Ontario is the one that was cited on that video that me and Andy saw, where the guy was coming back from a gig. In fact, he's on my Facebook now, and I want to interview him next year. And he's actually writing a book of his experience. He's told me, but it happened in the early 70s, I think. But he was actually taking aboard a craft with some bandmates of his that he was in a gig with. And interestingly enough, I can't tell his whole story because I can't remember it all in detail. But this guy plays the flute, and he was taken on board the craft. And they had to all undress, and he had his flute in a bag, which he carried around with him. And the aliens, I think he described them as greys, said you can put your bag down there, no one's going to take it type of thing, which was very human sounding. And so at the end of it, as he walked off the craft, he decided to show his flute to the alien in charge. And he actually played a few notes off his flute for him because he was a musician. And then he said, would you like to try to the alien? And so he said the alien did something completely bizarre to not what he expected. He said it had a mouth, but for some reason it stuck the end of the flute up its nose and played it and blew through it, which he thought was really weird. I wouldn't want to put my mouth over the mouthpiece then, I'll tell you. But he said, do you come from nearby? And the alien sort of indicated that it had a base under the water somewhere on the edges of Lake Ontario in Canada. So this guy came from St. Catharines in Canada. So I looked it all up on the map.
Bizarre.
St. Catharines is right next to Lake Ontario. So it's all tied up. It's really interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, there's also quite a few cases, of course, of UFOs seemingly draining water from lakes or reservoirs. And they may use that as for coolant or for other sources, maybe even to drink, who knows. But either way, there are a number of cases where people have reported. There was an incredible case that took place in Australia where numerous people witnessed a large spherical silver object that appeared to be draining water out of this lake, and they even contacted the local police station, and they've actually got the police recordings of these people talking about seeing this object sucking up water. Sadly, they didn't get any video footage of it for whatever reason, but we were talking about that earlier on, weren't we? Of course, goes back full circle, and we're talking about video evidence again. But yeah, either way, they've got the actual audio recordings to police with people talking about this large sphere apparently draining water, which is incredible.
But they've got the documentary evidence because their water bills are horrendous now. So what's the UFO cases you've investigated with underwater cases then, Dave? Around Birmingham, but I presume, what is it, off the Welsh coast or something, or Bristol Channel?
There was a fascinating case came in from a fisherman from the Isle of Wight, down on the south coast, down by
Southampton area again.
Indeed, yeah. Here we go, full circle again. Now this case, I've got no proof this is real, but he sent me numerous pages of his case report. He wrote down all the details for me and everything with the map and everything. He had no reason to give me this information. He wasn't gaining anything from it. He wasn't trying to sell it me or anything like that. He just wanted me to put it out via the website. So, as usual, I wrote a case report. And here's what happened. He was apparently on the rocks at the coast of the Isle of Wight, just doing a spot of fishing, and a couple of hundred meters off the edge of the coast. What he said happened was he saw two tic-tac shaped objects come up out of the water, one at a time. He said they were magenta in color. I know it sounds really bizarre. And they appeared to have sort of faint signs of movement, like there was objects moving around inside them. He saw these objects come up out of the water and hover about sort of 10 or so feet above the water surface. You could see the water all running off them. And then they apparently moved across a number of meters and then went back down into the sea. And that was it. And he wrote detailed drawings of this exact. He'd drawn pictures of what they looked like. It essentially resembled big tic-tacs. And Absolutely fascinating.
It's almost like they're deliberately showing themselves to him for a reason that we don't quite understand. Because I mean, what is the point of surfacing and then just going straight back under? What is the point of that? So it's got to be something along the lines of, "We're here. You need to notice us. You need to see what's going on."
Unless you come out of the water to scoop up vast amounts of oxygen really quickly, like almost figuratively taking a gulp of air. But obviously they can just suck it in through a fan or something. I don't know. And then they've got enough what they need because they can do it within seconds, maybe, rather than slowly pumping it through. And then they can go back down again for another 10 days or whatever they need to, you know.
There was I mean, it's a really weird one, that, due to the obviously the description of the objects, very, very unusual, and it almost it almost seems to be sort of pods or maybe life forms inside them. Very, very strange case, but as I say, the man's got no reason to share that, and it was quite a lot of depth he gave. You know, I did go back to him with questions, which he answered straight up. He did not seem to be fabricating that, but who knows for sure? It's a very unusual one. There's another case I dealt with many, many years ago now. I believe it was Spain. I want to say Spain or Portugal. Sorry, I've dealt with so many cases over the years. I'm going right back now. There was a case I dealt with. I think it was about 2011, maybe. It's on the website anyway. But essentially, the lady I was speaking with, she'd had a number of sightings across there, most of which had taken place, obviously up in the sky. But one particular incident, she was talking about seeing a large glowing yellow light move along underneath the surface of the water just off the coast, and it went right along past the beach. And she said it was, whatever it was quite sizable, and then it just went down and vanished from sight. It seems very unlikely that would be a submarine.
The Shag Harbour incident comes to mind every time.
It does indeed.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the best known underwater UFO cases.
Yes.
I mean, can you enlighten listeners about that? I mean, some might have heard of it, but some don't. And I've got a vague recollection of what it's about, but you probably know better than I do. Yeah,
there was a case from 1967 in Nova Scotia, Canada. They out in the bay, out in the harbour area, numerous residents saw unidentified lights up in the air above the sea, but also objects moving around underneath the water, glowing objects with sometimes multiple lights on them. They also witnessed these objects entering and coming out of the sea. So there was there was definite large-scale activity involving numerous objects there, whatever happened with that. And you do get these cases on record where you get a lot of activity. So, for example, the infamous Belgian wave, which is essentially hundreds of sightings of black flying triangular-shaped craft that were seen over Belgium in the mid-90s, and that was for a period of months. I think it was about 10 months where they got most of the sightings came in, and then it kind of died back down. And it certainly appears that there was some sort of exercise going on there, that they moved into that area, maybe to study the topography. Who knows? But lots and lots of cases came in, and then it died down and went away.
It's interesting you say about an exercise, because there's a theory, and I don't know what you feel about this, Dave, that the black triangular ones are actually military ones, whereas the other shapes, cigar-shaped or saucer-shaped, are possibly alien-type ones.
I wouldn't agree with that, and there's numerous reasons why I won't agree with that. I'm not saying that some of the black flying triangles that we're seeing couldn't be human flown craft. They could well be, and they may be back engineered ones, as we were talking about earlier, that the military are flying around. I've dealt with contact cases involving black triangles where people have been abducted onto black triangles and have then seen greys aboard the craft. So, and there's also a number of cases. A big one from Scotland springs to mind, the Fife incident, where people reported seeing a landed flying triangle with greys outside it walking around, appeared to be picking up samples of plant life or whatever from the area. So there's lots of cases directly linking flying triangle craft with alien species, with non-human occupants. So I would say that at least some of the, and also you have to take into account that the flying triangles themselves have pretty much the same maneuvering capabilities as other UFO craft types that I've seen, like the classic dome discs, etc. They can stop on a dime, they can shoot off extremely fast, they can move in and out of the visual range, either cloaking or moving off to another dimension. We don't really know. They can just make themselves invisible and visible at will. Sometimes they're absolutely ginormous in size, like far too large for something that the military would practically build for any particular reason.
Yeah.
So
be a runway for it, would there?
Well, exactly. I mean, some of the things that have been seen have been reported as being about a mile wide and blocked out the entire stars. So why would the military build something that large?
Yeah. Talk about the Belgian wave of triangles. What comes to mind about that is that the NATO headquarters of SHAPE, I believe it's called, is based in Belgium. So maybe there was some sort of reconnaissance going to do with the SHAPE headquarters.
Yes.
I know that the guy that's just recently died, the American guy that's actually worked for SHAPE in the 1960s, and he read like the briefing. Bob, not Bob Lazar, but another Bob.
Not Bob Dean.
Bob Dean, yeah, that's right. He worked for SHAPE headquarters in the 1960s, and he said that he read this briefing paper about the situation to do with aliens, about how many species were visiting this planet and how long they've been coming here and things like that. And it was classified as cosmic top secret or something like that. And he was privy to that information. And he thought that the people of the world should know about it. And absolutely. He died in the last month, didn't he?
Yeah, it's sad to hear. Yeah, I met Bob on a number of occasions, saw him at conferences over the years. A lovely chap, and very, very friendly. He had very high security clearance, really, genuinely did. He had, he was moving in upper circles and heard some information that was certainly above top secret. And he certainly came out and made statements saying that they were aware of the ET presence on Earth and were looking into it behind the scenes. I mean, he's made quite a lot of claims over the years. But yeah, a very good researcher. Sad that he's passed on.
Yeah. I mean, he was getting quite spiritual towards the end with all sorts of things.
He was, yeah.
Which I think there is a kind of spiritual aspect to UFOs, or some UFOs, I think. But you don't really hear much about you hear a hell of a lot about greys these days. But when I was a kid in the 70s growing up, I would never read about greys. It was always Nordic types that would show up in visitor cases. And where have they all gone to? That's really strange.
They haven't gone anywhere. Take my word for it. There's just as many cases on record coming in where people have Nordic experiences as grey experiences. A lot of the time with the repeat cases, people see both types and may have one or two experiences involving Nordics. There may be cases where they see both at once, where they're seeing Nordics with greys in the same area. Also takes into account other species as well. So really over the contact cases I've dealt with, there seems to be 4 species that come out time and time again. Yeah, that's what we've termed, and this is the names obviously that humans have given for these creatures. So we've got the greys. There's the Nordics named because they're sort of blonde, usually blonde or pale hair, look quite like Nordic in the people. There's of course the infamous reptilians. And also mantids or mantis beings, which appear to be somewhat like greys, really. They've got a lot of aspects that are like a grey, but a lot more sort of insectoid and usually very, very tall. So they're quite rare, but I have dealt with a number of cases, and sometimes the individual will see, they won't even refer to them as an alien. They may come to me and say they had a weird dream involving a 10-foot high grasshopper, for example. And they'll describe it as a big bug rather than as an alien. But yeah, the Nordics are still seen in cases, and are seen almost as often as greys. But yeah, they're less out of the public's perception because, well, they're less exciting, aren't they? If they're going to show an alien in, say, X-Files or an alien-themed movie, it certainly makes it a lot more interesting if it looks like a small creature with large eyes and oversized head, as opposed to just a very beautiful-looking human.
Yeah. Now that brings me to mind Billy Myers, who was talking to Nordic types. What's your opinion on that case? Because that was a bit of a tricky one, because he was bringing some pretty impressive pictures of almost like Bob Lazar type craft, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But the guy had one arm, so the accusation saying, "Oh, he's faked it," and he would say, "Well, I can't fake it because I've only got one arm." What's your take on that?
My take is that there may be some truth to the case. However, there's certainly, at the very least, a lot of elaboration. I think a lot of his photographs, especially the later ones, if you look at them with modern eyes, you'll clearly see that they've got small models that have been held in front of the camera on them. Some of the pictures that have been released that supposedly showed full-size trees at a distance are quite obviously small model trees, that you could buy for a train set. So the photographs are very dubious, and that also brings into disrepute some of the more famous earlier images that he brought out, and some of which do look surprisingly impressive. And some of the quintessential photographs of flying saucers have come from his case, and some of them do look very impressive indeed. Now, of course, he had contact with the Nordic beings, and they've been seen and talked about by many, many other contactees. And I'm not just talking about contactees who've got an interest in the subject and may have read about his case. I've, down on the ground as an investigator, I've spoken with lots and lots of people from lots of backgrounds and ages. I've spoken with children who've seen these beings. I've spoken with adults who've got no real interest in the UFO subject at all, and after telling me they want to just get on with their lives and aren't really that bothered about looking into it either. Obviously, it can sometimes form a fascination with the subject, and after having an experience, they start looking into it and looking for the cases which match their own. But a lot of the time, they're quite disinterested and just want to get on with their lives. So. Yeah, these beings are seen in a lot of different cases. So the fact that Billy Maher had seen them tends to suggest that maybe his experiences were real, and then he, wished to elaborate the evidence, for example, or add additional levels to his case and make it more dramatic than it actually was, perhaps.
Is it because he was a bit of a wanderer, wasn't he? I mean, he was in the French Foreign Legion for a while, and he kind of travelled around the world, supposedly meeting famous people. I think he met Saddam Hussein in the early part of his life, I believe.
Yes.
So it could be that, he's had one or two genuine encounters and managed to get some pretty decent photos, but he obviously wants to build upon that fame by then faking models. But
which is a pity.
I did see some claims that someone said, "Oh, well, the CIA have done these fake model pictures to discredit him again," And there was a shot supposedly of this alien lady, Nordic lady, a very beautiful lady or something, that he was in contact with. That was his contactee from the ship. And he supposedly got a photograph of her, but someone actually traced to say, no, this is a famous actress or TV dancer or something off the, I don't know, Rowan's Laughing Show or something from the 60s.
Indeed, yeah. And so again, that was found to have, and I've seen numerous other photographs that have been taken from other contact cases, supposedly showing Nordic beings. But of course, because they look so human-like, they could well be just very pretty-looking people, and just put out as, unfortunately, because of how they look, you can't really put that down as definite evidence that it's real, just because there's a photograph of something that looks a bit like a angelic looking human with long blonde hair. But even the photographs are out there of Gracie, some of which are very, very convincing and compelling, have turned out to be forgeries or very likely forgeries.
Stan Myers is one that I'm not sure about. Was it Stan Myers' case? Like this alien looking through his window.
The one looking through the window. It's not Stan Myers. It's something else. His surname's different. You've got Stan right. I can't remember his surname now. It's gone. But yes, the photo, the video footage of the alien through the window, and then the later piece of the alien in his kitchen. You see, now the problem with Stan's case, and I was fascinated by his case, but again, I have my doubts. There's too much seems to have gone on with that case. It's almost like he's gone down a checklist of all the things that can occur with contact, and his case happens to have it all in. Now, I'm not saying that that's not possible. I mean, we were talking about Tina's case earlier on, which is very, very impressive and has a lot of aspects in too. But his case seems to have literally everything going on in it. And the video pieces of footage that he's put out have been very, very interesting indeed. However, he did claim to have information downloads and have had these complicated mathematical equations given to him telepathically, and he's released those. He released those calculations, and they managed to track them down to a very rare paper that had been put out. So they were of human origin, not of alien origin. And if that bit's found to be fabricated, then you have to suspect the whole case, really. You can't say, okay, it doesn't matter that he faked that bit, the rest of it's real. It puts the rest into disrepute as well.
Yeah. Right, I think we've actually come to the end of our program. It's sped along like,
sped along like a UFO on the horizon.
Absolutely, no strings attached. So, Dave, if people want to get hold of you or see you in person, you're doing presentations at the moment or anything like that?
Well, as I said, I'm talking with Tina on the 6th of December down near Southampton. That's for another UFO group. I'm always giving talks. Just on Monday, I went to St Anne's and gave a talk up there, which went very well. It's my UFO music talk I gave up there. I'm always on the lecture circuit. You can find out details of upcoming lectures via our website. Of course, as I said, we have monthly meetings in Albury, Birmingham, which anybody's welcome to attend. You don't need to be an official BUFOG member to get involved. The website is www.bufog.com, bufog.com. We've also got a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Birmingham UFO Group. That's our official page for our group. I'll put out details of upcoming talks, etc. on there. And lastly, we've got a BUFOG Truth Seekers, which is our community page where we get in touch with each other between meetings, post videos and photos and articles, and people ask questions and have a good old natter about the subject. Anybody's free to join that community page. So if you're interested in what you've heard and want to ask me any questions directly, or just get involved with the group, you can do so via any of those methods.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the Paranormal Peep Show. Andy, any last words before we go?
No, just been a very interesting talk indeed. And we'll have to have Dave come back some point to elaborate on a few other things.
Further updates on all these abductors is very interesting, I have to admit. It's like the next exciting episode. I can't wait for next week. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Give our regards to all your team back in Birmingham. And, I will certainly come along sometime next year and do my Aliens on the Moon talk.
That sounds excellent. Yeah, it'd be great to have you back.
In evidence, I'm sure.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, it's good night from us on the Paranormal Peep Show, and stay tuned. We'll be along next month too. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
Everybody.
See you later.